Well, Danielle, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you as you're both an award-winning journalist and an experienced journalist. To start off with, could you tell us a little bit about your career and what you're currently doing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Naomi. So at the moment, I'm editor of the Brisbane Times, which is a metropolitan news site based in Queensland's capital. It's part of Nine Publishing. So we're one of the top 20 news sites in the country in terms of audience, and we cover sort of local, national, and international stories feature on our website. In terms of my career, I studied politics and journalism at the University of Queensland. I then worked for a couple of regional dailies, did a bit of a stint overseas, and then was in Canberra for 11 years, where I covered federal politics for most of that time, including the coup against Kevin Rudd. So I have a newspaper background, and then I've joined the Brisbane Times, and it's online only. So it's been an exciting time to learn all about digital. And Brisbane's actually my hometown, but I haven't lived here for quite a long time. So it's nice to be home as well.
You've been a journalist and editor for quite some time. Are there any
hmm
notable stories or interesting stories that you could share with us?
Oh, there's been so many highlights. I think some of the stuff that I did in Canberra, some investigative pieces into the world of lobbying. Obviously, it was pretty amazing to also be there when Kevin Rudd apologised to the stolen generations. And there was also the coup against Rudd and the first female prime minister. So all of that was pretty interesting. Working in South Africa was a great career highlight as well. It's something that I had always been interested in, the history of the country and apartheid and Nelson Mandela. So having that opportunity to go and work there for a while was really cool and interesting. Oh, and another career highlight is last year I finished up a 12-month fellowship with the Columbia Journalism School and Google News Initiative. And that was kind of a newsroom leadership fellowship. So that was an amazing opportunity. I learned a lot through that process.
So bringing it back to the present, you are obviously editor of Brisbane Times. What does a day in your life look like as an editor?
There are a few staples of a day. One of the things I love about journalism is no 2 days are exactly the same. I think that's really one of the beauties of this game. So sort of the staples of the day is I'm normally up about 5:30 checking what's making news. Maybe if I want to have some tweaks to the homepage, I'll send those through. Then I'm on deck from 7, like officially, and have a couple of things. So we have local and national news conferences. Sometimes I'll have extra meetings with product and tech teams. And it's just about making sure that we've got the best possible stories for each edition of the site. And so I work with the reporters on their ideas, and I also commission stories that I particularly want, and then we work out best ways to present them and best times to run them.
Really interesting. You mentioned obviously that you work alongside the reporters, and you
Mhm.
have an amazing team behind you, I assume. What do you look for in a journalist that is wanting to, I guess, join your newsroom? What are the qualities? What are the traits that you look for?
So there's a few things. So obviously a natural curiosity about the world, tenacity. You need to chase stories hard and make sure you've got the best possible version of a story on the website. I also look a lot too at what type of fit they would be with our culture. We devote a lot of energy to creating a culture that's very collaborative and collegial, and also celebrating our successes. And if we make a mistake, interrogating what went wrong and how to stop that happening again. So someone that's on board with getting constructive feedback and is always, and I'm also very big on constant learning and improvement. So, and I think the best time to do that is when, your masthead is performing well, because then you can, you have that kind of luxury of not being in crisis mode, and you can look at how you do things. I also like people that don't kind of rest on, we've done it this way, let's do it this way all the time, because, it's really good to push the boundaries of storytelling, or, come up with a new way to present a story, because the beauty of digital is that the platform doesn't dictate how the story is told. You can take from any technology to make the story sing. So it's really the story that dictates how it's told.
You spoke a little bit about skill sets there. What are the skill sets that you would say make a freelancer valuable to the newsroom culture you've already established?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think some of those things definitely hold true, as well as the fundamentals about accuracy, brevity, and clarity. I look for a really strong pitch. I look for pitches that relate to our audience. So something that would pass what I call the who cares test. So the who cares test is just asking yourself about any story. Who's going to care about this, and why will they care about that? And I look as well, for people's past work. I look at what they've done in the past, just to kind of get a feel for who they are and what their reputation is, if I don't know them already. So there's some of the things I look for.
What are the most common pitches you receive?
I think the most common pitches I receive are ones that are sort of opinion pieces. That would probably be the most common. And those can be tricky as well, because we get a lot of people that pitch us opinion pieces. So standing out from that crowd is particularly a challenge. I don't tend to get a lot that are sort of news stories. And, there's also the challenge of, particularly if a news story has sort of unnamed sources and stuff like that, just going through that verification independently to make sure that I'm confident that what we're going to put out there is accurate.
If someone was wanting to pitch to you, how would you recommend for them to, I guess, differentiate themselves?
I think there's a couple of ways. I think firstly, being succinct, so getting straight to the point. If you're competing with a lot of different people pitching opinion pieces, being succinct and getting right to the point, and really answering that question about why it would work for the readership of whatever masthead is really important. Also, a breadth of work. So if someone has a particular area of expertise and that's documented, then that would probably make you stand out as well. And also, and unless you're sort of super high profile, like a kind of first person piece might struggle a bit depending on the subject matter.
Obviously, because Brisbane Times is a digital platform, I wanted to ask if you find that the nature of pitches are changing. Are people just pitching stories, or are they pitching, say, a story idea with a multimedia asset nowadays?
Kind of depends, Naomi. Like there's no sort of general pitch. I have noticed that I haven't received a lot of pitches in a while, and I think that's probably reflective of the fact that COVID's hit and the media industry has gone through like a bit of a tough time, and one of the first things that we look at is spending on like contributors and whatnot. So I have noticed possibly in the last 6 months that I don't receive as many pitches as I normally do. But, you get the people that say, okay, so I've got photos and I've got this and that, which is always useful pitching to a digital site particularly.
So obviously you saying pitches have kind of lessened over the last 6 months. Do you think there will be a space or room for opportunity within, as the pandemic starts to, I guess, subside a little bit? Will there be more opportunity over 2021 for freelancers?
Well, I'm the eternal optimist about about this sort of stuff, because I believe firmly that as long as there's an appetite for really great stories, there's going to be work for storytellers. So I think that equally applies for journalists and freelance journalists. So like looking at my crystal ball, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with the pandemic. We seem to be in a good place now. Travel's returning. Some of the big funders of media are starting to advertise again. So my general comment would be I'm optimistic.
Do you think having a social media presence as a journalist or a freelancer is important? And if you do, how would you go about building that?
Yeah, I think it is important. Facebook is still quite a big driver of traffic to websites, universally. We can't rely on it solely, because obviously they can change the algorithm and that can change like the results. So I think having a social media presence, particularly if you're pitching to a digital editor, is really beneficial, because we can kind of see how active you are, what type of things you share, what sort of following you have. It's not the be and end all, but I think if you're going to build a brand, social media needs to be part of that brand. In terms of being good at social, I have I have this saying: it's better to have people think you're an idiot than to tweet and remove all doubt. So that's what I run through my head before I tweet something. And also, it's tricky. I can get that, but just be mindful that what you're posting on social might be looked at by someone who's making a decision about whether they pick up your pitch.
It's better to post something than not to post anything at all, because you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think another key thing for social is to be authentic, and it's not all about broadcasting. People may have a valid point that they have, or a complaint that's very valid, and to acknowledge that and to thank them for pointing it out, I think is a really good way to show that you're not just trying to broadcast all the time, and that you are actually engaging on social with people.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for sitting down with me and chatting today.